welcome you to our feature event this semester in the Professionals in Sustainability Speaker Series. I am Kathy Lang, and I work here at SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry as program coordinator for our online Bachelor's of Science degree completion program in sustainability management. And as part of career exploration for students in this degree, which I think I see one so far in our participants, we've sought out and learned from a number of sustainability professionals in public and private sectors, including for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. Some have been graduates of ESF and even employees, but not all. So we've sought to learn about existing career paths, current efforts in the field of sustainability, and how students can start making connections within these professions. Past recordings of these events are available on our YouTube playlist, which I put a little QR code, which you can access the webpage right here from this slide. But I will also send a link out to this page and a recording of today's event afterwards. So as we proceed with today's presentation, I welcome you to post chats, post any questions you have to our chat. We will open up mics for Q&A and hope to have a conversation with our presenter towards the end. So other than that, hopefully folks are able to hear me okay. I just got one message through the chat. I see a thumbs up from Doug. Otherwise, great. Okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to John Turbyville, Director of ESF's Office of Career Services, to introduce our speaker. And thank you again for being here with us.
Thanks, Kathy, and thanks to everybody who's with us today. We in Career Services are delighted to continue our partnership with Kathy and the Open Academy on this series of webinars for professionals in sustainability. And so without further ado, it's with great excitement that I introduce today's presenter, Sarah Fisher-Curtin. Sarah is the Director of Sustainability at Battery Park City Authority. She began her career at the University of Pennsylvania in the Division of Facilities and Real Estate Services. For 7 years, she oversaw initiatives to enhance environmental sustainability and reduce carbon emission at a university-wide scale. Before joining BPCA, she was a sustainability planner at 1100 Architect, which is a New York and Frankfurt-based architecture firm. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Global Environmental Politics from American University and a Master's of City Planning from the University of Pennsylvania. It won't take you long to see her passion for which she approaches her work and the lifelong professional commitment she has made to the more intentional incorporation of sustainability in the workplace, specifically in terms of strategic planning. Before turning things over to Sarah, I would like to thank her for serving as a speaker during this series, and is with great excitement for our audience to hear firsthand of the unique and opportune things that can impact positively career paths that are possible for folks within the sustainability fields. And so with that, I'll turn things over to Sarah.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Hello to everyone. Thank you for having me. So I have some slides which will walk through, chronologically the roles that I have had, and we'll end with a deeper dive in some of the work that I'm doing now at Battery Park City Authority. Let's see, advance my slides. Okay. So I am originally from Georgia and was always interested in the natural environment and ecology. And so when I was choosing where I wanted to go to college, I was definitely looking to pursue something with an environmental tilt, and was also very interested in politics. And so I went to American University, and they, situated in the nation's capital, have a very rich politics program and our global politics program, but was unique to it. And what appealed to me was that I could focus specifically in environmental politics. And so could get a broad cross section of what's happening around the world, and how the natural environment was showing up in governance issues. And what I also enjoyed about my time here was that I had a lot of different internships. Being in DC, I was able to work at a few different places to get a breadth of experience. So from a smaller nonprofit, working in South America, to working at the International City County Managers Association. So working with professionals managing city problems. So getting a big scale there to sort of bring into my schoolwork. So having the access to those internships was really helpful to me. And then in addition, I studied abroad and got in Chile, in Santiago, and I got an internship there with their Ministry of the Environment. And it was a very exciting time to be in Santiago because they had just elected their first woman president. And so she had appointed, a new different ministers. And so there was a lot of energy in the Ministry of the Environment there. So I think that, the getting the in-school work and then comparing it with internships to see which are, how are different organizations and how are people channeling, a passion around the environment into their work, was so exciting to me. And just to see the different avenues that you could take on. So after completing my degree here, I wanted to go to graduate school and really was interested in design also. I do come from a family of landscape architects. So, oh yes, I appreciate that. Cheers. So they obviously had a little bit of effect on my worldview. But I really found that city planning for me brought people and the landscape together in a way that energized me. And so I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and something that was important to me when I was looking at programs was that while I wanted to be in city planning for this people and sort of physical planning, I wanted to be around other disciplines. And so the School of Design at Penn has architecture and landscape architecture and historic preservation, in addition to fine arts. And I just thought being in that environment with a lot of disciplines was sounded really creative to me, and the ability to take different classes in different topic areas. But also I see now, like hindsight, that's a lot what my job is now, is being in conversations with people from a lot of different disciplines. And that's something that I think then that nugget of an interest, I wouldn't have been able to say how that would come out in my professional career years later, but being surrounded by a lot of different disciplines was really important to me there. While I was at Penn, in the city planning program, you get an internship in between your first and second year. And so I applied and got a position at the Clinton Climate Initiative. So I was so excited to work there for a summer. I was on their waste team. So the Clinton Climate Initiative, sorry, I should back up. The Clinton Foundation has a partnership of more than 40 cities around the globe. And the Clinton Foundation sort of provides them expertise in their goals. They don't necessarily direct the individual city goals, but provide expertise and often help them embed an officer role with the Climate Foundation within city governments. So I was on the waste team, which is very glamorous and very exciting. And so was able to work on various different projects. And so I got assigned to the waste team. I didn't know what that would include. And so I would help cities on different waste projects, doing research, providing best practices, doing sort of financial analysis. So like one big project I worked on was in India. There's a lot of construction happening. And so they were dealing with a lot more construction and demolition waste than they had previously had going, a waste stream that was growing they previously had. So we were looking at different ways to reduce C&D waste. I worked with the City of London, providing them sort of best practices in anaerobic digestion for projects that they were launching there. So through this internship, again, was seeing how different cities were taking on sustainability and making sure that it was reflective of those cities and their goals, but through, collaboration and planning, and this people and physical design work was something that I was seeing that I was really, happy to be participating in, and, enriching that with my coursework at Penn. So I graduated from Penn in the lovely economy of 2009. So there were, so many jobs. I'm saying that very ironically, but I do want to say that it was a little daunting, as I imagine it is anytime graduating. So I actually, when I first graduated, I got a research assistantship at Penn in the executive vice president's office. And they were gearing up for the creation of a sustainability plan. But their executive vice president wanted to know how you engage through communications and stakeholder engagement, a cross section of a community like a university that involves students, faculty, and staff. And so they had a research project where this role would be reaching out to different sustainability directors and interviewing them and hearing about how they launch their plans, and then looking at other similar communication campaigns about how do you engage people, how do you find what motivates people in a big community, how do you target smaller populations to have them affect change. And so I first got this 3-month research position, and it was great in that I got to talk to a lot of sustainability directors about recently released plans, because this is in 2009. So that was we're in a lot of new university big scale sustainability plans were happening. And from there, I got to know, what the university was doing. And the president at Penn at the time, Dr. Amy Gutman, had signed a climate commitment in 2007. So the university was gearing up, as my research project, was helping them do that. And they needed somebody to help coordinate the development of that plan. And so I made the case that you need somebody to coordinate this formally. The sustainability initiatives at this stage have been led by a single person, along with like a deep bench of interns, but you need someone to shepherd the creation of a formal plan. And so fortunately was hired in a role, a sustainability associate role at the University of Pennsylvania. So in their facilities and real estate services department, and within the university architects group. And I should just note that position was initially a 2-year position, like a term limited 2-year position. They'd never had a sustainability office before. Like I said, they had a director, and then many student interns, but they hadn't formalized how sustainability was going to be reflected at the university and reflected for a long time. So they wanted to make sure that it was placed in the right department, that it had the right funding. So I was in a role, sustainability associate role, for 2 years before it became a formal role where I was the sustainability strategic planner. And so I was there for 7 years, and it was a great place to be because it had leadership that wanted to put forward really motivating and ambitious goals. And so I helped them coordinate across the university stakeholder engagement to weigh in on the development of a sustainability plan, a climate action plan. So goals around energy, the physical environment, goals around water, goals around academics. And so a lot of stakeholder engagement occurred in that process, and a lot of review of documents and ensuring that what we were putting forward was reflective of who Penn wanted to be in this sustainability mission. And so I also was there when we released, the second climate action plan. And so it was great to, it's a unique position to say, oh man, we didn't have that type of data then. Now that we have this data, let's refine these goals. So for example, like not all buildings were fully metered, and individual schools and centers weren't necessarily seeing their true usage reports in the first plan. And by the time we released a second plan 5 years later, schools and centers were getting reports of their actual usage for their buildings. So you're seeing that makes the case, that makes the argument you should invest in this asset a little easier when you're seeing a decrease, for example, in your energy usage or water usage. So I was part of sort of these larger documents setting the university on this course for environmental sustainability. Some other things that I participated in was the launch of the university's Green Fund, which was $1 million loan fund that was available to students, faculty, and staff to do different sustainability projects across the university. As I mentioned, the sustainability office then was really small, and we're only in one part of the university, and it is full of great people doing interesting things or seeing opportunities that we couldn't imagine. And so this fund was a way that the university saw to sort of spread environmental sustainability access across the university. So students could apply. When I was overseeing it, some students applied to start the first campus garden. Some other students applied to retrofit their campus fraternity with retrofits. And in some cases, the fund, it's a grant. And in some cases, they do repay it, so based on savings. So that I learned about grant management, how to sort of set this up, what type of reporting process we were expecting from participants, how to do a certain level of documentation, learn how to step in when something isn't quite, the greatly written application, and then at practicality, something isn't working quite right, how to come together and how to tweak implementation to get the goals that you'd like to see out of a small project. We also participated in a lot of events for students and faculty and staff to engage them in, whether with staff, like green purchasing initiatives, and students coming to ask for, more resources around sustainability, be they in the engineering school or be they in the business school. And so, having them, like hearing from them what they see in the sustainability plan and then how they want it reflected in their coursework, were a lot of discussions that I had at Penn. And then also while I was there, the campus was growing. So this picture here, in the bottom right, is that the green swath there with the tennis courts originally was a parking lot owned by the post office. And so Penn had purchased that and turned it into a mixture of recreational green space and passive recreation space. A lot of new buildings were built during this time period. So we put in place standards around meeting a minimum of LEED silver, often achieving beyond that. But in addition to new construction, the bulk of what facilities does is renovations. And so we also, in small projects. And so we wanted to make sure that we were not only applying a lens of sustainability to the new shiny buildings, that we were also doing it in our day-to-day operations and maintenance, because also that's where a lot of the carbon and energy is. And so I also helped oversee how we apply sustainability in our renovations and in our O&M practices. So that was it was a great experience, and it was a program that really matured, helping being part of it as it matured and sort of formalized, and now is baked in across the university. So I was there for 7 years, and then I was looking to move to New York, and I got a position with 1100 Architect, and my role was partially communications and partially sustainability planning. And so they are a small firm that has an office here in New York, and then an office in Frankfurt, Germany. And so the legacy and high standards of German design and environmental sustainability was really appealing to me. And I was also interested to see what it was like to be on the consultant side. Like at Penn, I was on the owner side. And so I thought this would be a great, opportunity to see what it's like to be on the client side and get maybe more exposure to different topics. So the top picture is a building they did in Darmstadt, Germany, and then below is a school, a private school, Berkeley Carroll School here in New York. So they had a big cross section of clients, from private clients to universities to schools. And so in my role sort of as in marketing communications was helping them tell their story about this work that they were doing. And then in sustainability was providing my expertise around sustainability in the physical environment. And it was a great position to see how a smaller firm participates in this environment and how they can bring this level of sustainable design to schools, to larger projects. So I was there for 3 years, and then I was looking to get back more fully, 100% into sustainability again. And I had also learned that I really liked being on the owner operator side. I think it appeals to my inclination as a planner to be like the shepherd of a space. And while as a consultant, I got a lot of exposure to different projects, different puzzles to solve. I sort of always wanted to stay and hear about well, how did that operate? How did it improve? Or what didn't work, and how, now that you've been in that building, for a few years, how is it, what is different? So was looking to get back on sort of the owner, the owner side of things. And so I got a job at Battery Park City Authority, which is a state benefit corporation. And I talk a little bit about its history in a moment, but I was hired in 2019 as their senior project manager in their real property department, which is their capital projects department. And then in December of this year, was promoted to be their director of sustainability. So here's some skyline views of Battery Park City, and some of our beautiful 36 acres of parks and open space. And just to orient us all, Battery Park City is here in Lower Manhattan. Trying to move my mouse. On the west side of Lower Manhattan. So it's 92 acres, a mixture of commercial and residential and open space, 36 acres of parks and open space. And so because Battery Park City is a pretty special place, I wanted to, put forward some great pictures of Battery Park City being built. So Battery Park City is, was old piers that were filled in that were run down and dilapidated. And so this is a picture from 1958 of these piers falling into a state of disrepair. And so the creation of Battery Park City came to be when the state decided, let's make a state benefit corporation to oversee the construction and the maintenance and the ongoing operations of this new neighborhood in Lower Manhattan. So this picture is probably around sort of 1971. The Twin Towers were finished then, but you can see here it was like flat, and it boggles my mind even now when I go to work sometimes that this used to be in the river and it is fill, and some of the fill, or a lot of the fill actually, came from the construction of the Twin Towers in that excavation. So Battery Park City, we actually own, Battery Park City Authority owns the land in Battery Park, and then we actually don't own the buildings themselves. We have long-term ground leases there. So just a little sequence: 1968, creation of BPCA, and 1970 start demoing the first piers. The first building in Battery Park City goes up in 1974. Residents start to move in the early 80s. The Esplanade is a pathway along the Hudson River, and that opens up in the 80s. And we have Winter Garden, which is now Brookfield Place, so an anchor tenant of retail and commercial office space. We have a museum. The Museum of Jewish Heritage is in our South neighborhood. And in 2000, the authority releases the BPC Green Guidelines, which I will remember that. I will come back to it, but it's key to our sustainability story. So that directs some of the new construction that's happening, those guidelines. And then, in 2012, we have Hurricane Sandy. And in 2020, a sustainability plan. So it's a lot of things, squished in on one squiggly line here, but it's mostly to highlight, this creation of a new neighborhood that does have, from its beginnings, roots in environmental sustainability. So this statement here is from our 1979 master plan. And Battery Park City from the beginning was always thought of to be 1/3 residential, 1/3 commercial, and 1/3 open space. So we have a rich legacy of environmental leadership, and this commitment to our parks and open space has been there from the beginning. So here's a selection of playgrounds, passive recreation space, wild gardens, more traditional landscapes, can all be found in Battery Park City. And while we are our own state authority, we use all New York City services, except for we have our own parks operations department that oversee this beautiful landscape. And so this is a photo of some of the buildings in the North neighborhood that were built as a result of these green guidelines. So the authority in the early 2000s created some guidelines that directed some of the first LEED buildings in the United States came out of these guidelines. Very forward thinking, LEED, gold, silver buildings in our North neighborhood. The Solaire, I think, was the first high-rise LEED building in the US. So sustainability plans, theme of my slides here. So when I was brought on to the authority, as I said, we've had this rich environmental legacy, but they were looking to refresh this commitment and sort of build on it. So I helped them develop sort of 3 documents with a consultant to guide to the next 10 years of sustainability in Battery Park City. Our board had directed us to create a plan, but had given us the larger goal of being carbon neutral by 2050. So they gave us that directive in 2019. And so we started at work on these 3 documents, which is a sustainability plan, our implementation plan, and sort of new green guidelines. And so these documents were released in 2020. So our sustainability plan is the vision statement and the actions and the goals around environmental sustainability. It was also important to us to start first with a sustainability plan and not just a climate action plan. The sustainability plan has energy, water, materials and waste, and site. We really wanted it to be holistic. And so we have a vision document, and then the implementation plan are the steps and measures by which we will achieve the goals outlined in the sustainability plan. And then the green guidelines, as I mentioned, the original ones were created in the early 2000s, but were oriented towards new construction. And since Battery Park City is pretty much entirely built out, and since most of the carbon and energy consumption happens in the O&M of buildings, we updated these guidelines to focus on the operations and maintenance of buildings and how you can lessen the environmental footprint. So these are from the sustainability plan, the topic areas. With each of these topics has actions and sub-actions for the authority. So this is a 10-year plan with milestones set in there. So we're doing a lot of interesting work. And one thing I do want to note about the plan is that it is both a plan for the authority's actions itself, but also for the neighborhood wide. So really some of these goals require and will necessitate community engagement, partnership with buildings, partnerships with businesses in Battery Park City. And so we didn't want it to be just for the authority itself, but reflective of how we in the neighborhood are sort of the steward of this space, and how can we serve as a facilitator to enhance environmental sustainability in Battery Park City. So later on in the Q&A, I'm happy to go in if anybody has a favorite work item on here that they're really into biodiversity or really want to talk about water conservation. Happy to talk in more detail about some of those individual actions that we're doing here. So we now I'll sort of talk about some recent projects we're doing. We did do a climate action plan. So that is looking specifically at carbon and how are we going to achieve a goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. So this document, very technical with modeling, both our business as usual pathway and then the carbon neutral pathway, showing what actions that the authority can take, what actions the buildings are going to have to take, what impact state and city legislation and actions that they are taking are going to impact our goals. So it really helps us refine where we're going to put our focus in the next few years around carbon. So you can see here, we took each, we looked at the sustainability plan, went through the strategies to see which ones had a relationship to carbon reduction, and then did modeling around that and extrapolated it to 2050, because our plan is a 10-year plan to 2030. So for this climate action plan, we needed to extrapolate those goals to 2050 to see where the carbon would land, and what standards and what measures we need to start putting in place now, and which ones are the most significant, and which ones are the ones that we have control over, and which ones are the ones that we need to work with our partners on to best achieve. So another big project I helped lead was our building inventory. So as I mentioned, we own the ground in Battery Park City and have long-term ground leases with the buildings. And so we see our role here for sustainability as a facilitator. And so we don't necessarily always know the issues that buildings are facing or what type of capital improvements that they are undertaking. So this engagement with them was we were requesting information from them about capital projects, any sustainability standards they had, details about control systems they're using or plans to upgrade them. And then also information related to public information they already support to the city's DOB. So in New York City, every year buildings have to submit benchmarking data for water and energy. So we were requesting that information. And so we were able to put together quite a broad database and get insight into what are the issues that are obstacles or concerns or excitements that the buildings in Battery Park City are overseeing. So this is one question we asked our the buildings Battery Park City is, what type of needs do you have around sustainability? So, project identification and prioritization. I think that we were happy to see that they know that they need to be or are doing these types of projects and are just having, don't have the time or don't yet have the ability yet to identify which ones to mark off on their capital project list. So that helps us in this facilitator role to say, okay, I know that NYSERDA has a program specifically around technical assistance, and let me connect you with them. Or I know that Con Ed has programs specifically around and demand energy management. Maybe that gets at some of your concerns. So this endeavor, while a lot of data crunching and assessing where the buildings land, really is allowing us to determine how to best serve our buildings and best connect them with resources. And then another quite large endeavors happening in Battery Park City is our resiliency work. So I mentioned Hurricane Sandy. We're along the Hudson River, in the Hudson Estuary. And so we have 3 resiliency projects right now. The Ball Fields resiliency was a point solution, and that is complete. The South Battery Park City has just started construction, and the Northwest Battery Park City project is in design. And we have a whole team leading these projects, and I participate on sustainability measures. But these resiliency as a whole is directed within the authority's strategic plan. So these projects are a mixture of using the landscape as a flood barrier, and then in instances also floodgates and dams and the whole bit. So the south is under construction and the northwest is underway. And we have a lot of materials, I will say, on our website with a lot of renderings that I think are really compelling to show, new design and, how, we're having to raise the land, raise the earth to meet sea level rise, and how we're going to address what is to come. And then just a few other actions I wanted to mention that get in our other topic areas. So our 75 battery facility is our parks operations headquarters. And so that houses horticulture and our maintenance department and our parks programming department. We received true zero waste certification for that facility. So it's a lot of waste audits, going through that waste, identifying where we can reduce what we're throwing away, where we can be reusing. And so we received a gold certification. Right. Another project I'm leading is a urban tree canopy assessment, which will start this summer. We're gearing up for that field work. So measuring Battery Park City's tree canopy, seeing how that mitigates urban heat island effect, how we can start planning for, trees that are going to end their natural life. How can we start to plan for that replacement? How can we identify areas that need more canopy, and if canopy can't be put there, are there ways that we can use like cool pavement or at least lighter materials? So that's work will happen this summer, and then there will in the fall be a public engagement version of this assessment where you can go on to the New York City has a version of this where you can go on and you can identify each tree, find out all the details about it, when's the last time it was pruned, when it flowers, but we're also looking to add sort of the biodiversity of Battery Park City here. And so we're also looking at how our planting beds and all our plants could also be shown in this tree inventory. We're in the process of doing a pervious paving or permeable, actually paving pilot in Battery Park City. So we've got 2 locations in 2 different products. And we're seeing how those, how that paving, works for a full year. So how does it work? What's the wear and tear? What's the O&M? How does that upkeep during, winter and snow treatments? So we have 2 locations in right now, and they were selected, both by areas, both because maybe there are areas that already have an issue with pooling or are high traffic areas that we want to identify to really see how these materials stand up. We are tracking in our capital projects department reuse and salvage opportunities. In the South Battery Park City Resiliency Project, we oversaw a huge plant salvage initiative where our horticulture department reached out to other parks departments to let them know that we had this, these a range of plant material. And so we're able to find new homes for that plants, divert that from going to the landfill. To doing smaller scale, but really, great for our parks programming and education, a beehive in Battery Park City. And while this beehive is for honeybees, we also recently, our horticulture department put in bee hotels for native bees. So we're welcome to all the bees in Battery Park City. And then I'm also overseeing a district energy feasibility assessment. So, what could a district scale energy system in Battery Park City look like? How could a geothermal system loop? How does that work? Is it, so we're at the middle stages of that, but, looking at really how could that reduce the building's carbon and what all would that entail in the installation, the O&M of a system, who owns that system, and what, how could we pair a geothermal system with renewables. So we're in the analysis stage there. So that's some of what I'm working on, and I'm happy to answer any questions about topics I'm working on or steps to getting here. But thank you for listening.
A lot of information, and you're doing a lot. So, yeah, thank you so much. And we do have time here for questions for Sarah. If folks can stay on, I know our Zoom goes through 2. I have advertised 1:45, so if people need to cut out, I understand. But I would say if you can stay, please do. Sarah's available, and it'd be great to have some questions for her, whether in the chat, or I believe you can unmute yourself. Yeah. I also just want to say thank you, and welcome to a couple more sustainability management students I recognized, and the SUNY Ulster Environmental Club. I see a classroom there, so thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm just seeing the chat because I was like in the depths of my slides. So sorry for not being more immediately responsive. But Ann Papa George, oh, I'll have to write her. She's the loveliest. She's the head of, and is still the head of Penn Facilities and Real Estate Services, and does a fantastic job. And she helped create this first sustainability office at Penn and put it on its course. Jacob made a comment about Tribeca. Yes, during Sandy. So what I've heard is that Battery Park City, we get our power from a different Con Ed plant farther north. And so that's why we had power during that.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So there is a question here about coordination with Park Service. Castle Clinton National Monument, would you work with federal partners?
So actually that is adjacent to us. Sorry, I was going to see if I could go back to that is a Battery Park itself is not a part of Battery Park City, which, you'd think they could find more names, but we're, it is adjacent to us. So we work closely with the Battery Park Conservancy that oversees Castle Clinton, but our reach sort of extends to Pier A in the most southern portion of Lower Manhattan.
Going back to the power item, where did the battery come from then? Do you know, Battery Park?
I think because we're next to the battery, so we're Battery Parks. We're the city. We're the city part of Battery Park.
Not sustainability related, other than if there was a battery.
Yeah, no, there was a battery.
battery.
There was a battery down. It used to be a battery, but the historic battery is overseen by a different conservancy.
Okay. Oh, we've got a lot of history buffs in the chat. So
okay.
Thank you.
Battery refers to fortress, not battery as in electric storage.
Man, but we would have been real ahead of our time.
Well, I started thinking that. I was like, wow, they are generating, storing. Yeah. So here's a great question. Thank you, Kara. And what do you think your current canopy coverage percentage is, and who's completing your canopy mapping, if you wanted to share?
Yeah. I don't know what our canopy mapping is, but I will be able to tell you at the end of the summer, once we complete this project. We did an RFP for this, and AKRF and SCAPE are leading that, with Borough Happold are leading that project for me. So we're really excited and trying to think about, you know, the data that we collect, how can it like live beyond just this measure? And so making sure we had a software platform that had a public facing portion is super important to us. So I would expect us to be able to release that in the fall.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did do a little looking around your website, and I do think there's some great information. So to see dashboards like that will be great. Yeah. And I'm glad Jacob asked this in the chat. I was wondering the same thing, internship opportunities. And I guess even your thoughts on suggestions for entry-level positions with someone thinking about you're the director of sustainability, so starting out.
Yeah. So we do have, especially in the summer, have internships available. I can send Kathy the link. They're on our website under, I think you go to opportunities and then under employment. Yeah, so some resources, if you're interested in like campus sustainability, the ASHE organization puts out a pretty regular newsletter, and they have resources around, they post job opportunities. And I think learning also about what organizations are doing around sustainability to determine if it's a place, if you want to be on sort of the client side at an organization, or if you want to be at a consultant level. I think a lot of places are hiring. Yeah, I'm sure John could maybe answer this question more
Yeah,
with a longer list of resources, but I would just say like attending events or just finding out about what organizations are doing around sustainability can be a helpful marker to determine if it's a place that you want to be, and find out if they're at the beginning of their endeavor, or if it is, they're farther along and they like already have had a sustainability plan and they're really refined in their expertise. I also always find it probably kind of like nerdy, but interesting to see in organizations where sustainability sits, like who does that report to? Is it reporting to finance? Like, does that tell you something? At Penn, I sat in facilities and real estate services. At other universities, sustainability sits in the provost on the more academic side. So I think that can also be an interesting, you can try to use that as a tell also.
Yeah. Thank you. And I see Doug Johnston, our former curriculum coordinator and current professor in our program, who teaches. We have a capstone course, so the final class as part of the sustainability management degree. And so we if you ever have ideas for capstone projects, we'd welcome them, because our students complete these. So something to think about too.
Yeah, something to think about. And maybe you share with me later over email or something, some examples of previous ones, so that I can be thinking about what that could be for us.
Definitely. Awesome. All right. Well, we can last call for questions. Again, if you want to unmute, feel free.
There's a question about from Jessica. But now that LEED buildings have been around for some time, have there been like observable savings that have been seen in the energy side of things?
Yes and no. I think a lot of buildings thought that it would just be blanket. You're like good to go. You built a building, LEED standard, but really it's the operations and maintenance of that building. And so New York City passed a law a few years ago that buildings now have to post in their lobby their energy grade, kind of like when you go to a restaurant, their energy grade. And so I think buildings were a little surprised that, a LEED building has to post that they got a C, they have a C energy rating. So I think in some instances, yes, but I think others were surprised that it's an ongoing process, and really it's the O&M of the building to ensure that it meets. It's not like a set, build it and set it, forget it, that you need to care for that building and its envelope and mechanical systems. So I think not as much as people thought, which I think is a little bit what the authority said. We have this big environmental legacy, but we need to refresh it, and we can't just coast on it. We need to make sure that it's reflective of where we want to be headed now.
When you mentioned communications to residents, engaging, I think that's part of it. Operations and management, you hopefully attract people that buy into the fact that you have a sustainability plan, and then might then be more motivated to participate and be conscientious residents.
Yes, absolutely. Or if you're an employer and you're looking for office space and you go into like really beautiful office space, but the energy grade is really low, maybe that wouldn't have jumped out at you before, but now is like a marker you're using to help select where you're going to put your office space. And so that makes the building then invest, it's just giving people, helping direct the market a little bit also.
So as part of follow-up for today's program, I will email everyone that attended and as well at registered, who couldn't be here, but links. And so I'll follow up with Sarah too, if there's anything you want to add to highlight in terms of resources.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Come to Battery Park City. Yeah.
I'd like to know. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being here.